Hello again, my name is Jamie McMahon, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about Abigail Adams. I chose Abigail Adams because I've always been kind of a fan of John Adams, so I wanted to learn a little bit more about her. Obviously, she's remembered most for being the First Lady and wife of John Adams and the mother of John Quincy Adams, but there was a lot more to Abigail Adams than just that. For example, Laura Richards wrote a book, Abigail Adams and Her Times, where she brings out a lot of the childhood of Abigail Adams. She was actually born to a very prominent family in New England. She was related to John Hancock and a descendant of the Quincy's. She really did not get to have much education as a child, as girls really did not get a chance to go to school like boys. There was no real formal education. She was taught a lot by her grandmother, and she was very well read. She later met John Adams. They decided to get married. In the beginning, her family was very much against it, said that he was a dishonest lawyer. His dad was a small country farmer. Of course, little did they know that this small country farmer's son would one day become president of the United States. Even from that humble beginning of very little education, Abigail Adams was very intelligent, very well-read, very educated from herself. And one of the things that a lot of people do not know about her is she was one of the earliest advocates for the rights of women. During the time of the American Revolution, when many times John Adams had to be away at congressional conventions, whatever it may be that he had to go to, he kept up a very steady writing campaign with his wife, and she all the time would try to put in her ideas, and she would try to influence him. The most famous letter that she wrote to him was on March 31st, 1776, as they were sitting and contemplating the Declaration of Independence, their Constitutional Congress, and she writes him and the famous words, "Please remember the ladies," where she encourages John Adams and the other members of Congress to remember the women as they do this. She was very, very excited about his independence. A lot of this comes from a book called From Suffrage to the Senate, America's Political Women, where they talk about her letter writing campaign to her husband and how that she really tried to influence him. Her letter campaigns was more than just to him. She actually wrote to another correspondent where she said she had contemplated asking Congress for women's independence. She believed that women did not get equal independence with men at the time. She was also very, very upset, and probably the biggest crutch that she had, the biggest problem she had with what was going on with the new country in America here was she was very upset about the education inequalities for young girls, that they did not have the same possibilities that young boys did. They did not get the same education. She was also very upset about the lack of rights for married women. Married women could not own property, could not really run business. They couldn't do very much as far as that was concerned. And then in another journal, in the Historical Journal of Massachusetts, author by the name of L.M. Dodge writes an article about Abigail Adams, talked about how she was never extremely vocal about her ideas about women's rights. Obviously at that time probably would not have been very easy to be, but she definitely had these ideas, and even though she did not stand up on a podium, yell and scream about the rights of women, she was very influential at the time, not just to John Adams and her letters, but she also just defied norms in her life. Even though she could not technically own property, she was a very shrewd businesswoman. She used John's position she took advantage of that. She used wartime shortages to take advantage and make money. And when her and John both died, their families were able to keep their estate for over 100 years, where George Washington and a lot of the others had to be sold to pay off their debts. They had no debt and they were very, very wealthy. Probably her last little thing that she did as she passed away, even though women could not inherit property, she left most of her property to her granddaughters. Very nice little fitting thing there at the end for Abigail Adams, one of the first champions for women's rights.